Why'd you come on to me?
Like I said, I made a mistake. I heard you speaking French. Often in these big hotels, you run into women from foreign countries who may need a translator or a guide.
How many languages do you speak?
5 or 6.
Plus the international language.
That's right.
Richard Gere coming on to Lauren Hutton in American Gigolo, one of 5 new movies we'll be reviewing on sneak previews. Across the aisle from me, Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And this is Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune. In addition to American Gigolo, which we both liked a lot, we'll be reviewing the new thriller The Fog, Neil Simon's autobiographical movie Chapter 2, Dom DeLuise in Fatso, and now Gene starts with Peter Sellers in Being There.
Being There is a satiric comedy with Peter Sellers giving a great performance, one of his best in years, as a mysterious man whose only experience with life comes from watching television and tending his garden. He's a simple-minded gardener who becomes a national hero, and through a complicated set of circumstances, Sellers soon finds himself in a 3-way conversation with the President of the United States and with one of the world's richest men. Now remember, all that Sellers knows about life is TV and his garden. The 3 men are discussing the sorry state of the nation's economy.
Mr. Garner, do you agree with Ben, or do you think we can stimulate growth through temporary incentives?
As long as the roots are not severed, all is well, and all will be well in the garden.
In the garden?
Yes. In a garden, growth has its season. First comes spring and summer, but then we have fall and winter. And then we get spring and summer again.
Spring and summer?
Yes.
Then fall and winter?
Yes.
I think what our insightful young friend is saying is that we welcome the inevitable seasons of nature, but we're upset by the seasons of our economy.
Yes. There will be growth in the spring.
Well, Mr. Garner, I must admit that is one of the most refreshing and optimistic statements I've heard in a very, very long time.
Well, he makes a hit with the president, Jack Warden, and also with Melvyn Douglas. And after a television interview, Sellers quickly becomes a national sensation. Everybody wants his opinions, even though he's simply a gardener who can neither read nor write. Everyone wants a part of his success. He's a national media star, even though he's an apparent know-nothing. And at a Washington cocktail party, a book publisher tries to get Sellers' words of wisdom into print.
Hello, Ronald. How are you?
Just fine.
Good. I am fine, too.
Good, good.
Yes, good. We're fine.
Yeah, fine. Mr. Gardner, my editors and I have been wondering if you would consider writing a book for us. Something about your political philosophy. What do you say?
I can't write.
Of course not. Who can nowadays? Listen, I have trouble writing a postcard to my children. Look, we can give you a 6-figure advance. I'll provide you with the very best ghostwriter proofreaders.
I can't read.
Of course you can't. No one has the time. We glance at things, we watch television.
I like to watch TV.
Oh, sure you do. No one reads.
This is a very offbeat but thoroughly original film. What happens to us during the movie is that we begin to see the world afresh through Peter Sellers' eyes, through the eyes of an innocent person who is seeing the outside world for the first time. And our world does really look strange through innocent eyes. In that way, Being There is not only an original comedy, it's a poetic statement on the condition of our contemporary world. I thought it was a terrific picture.
I thought it was terrific, too. A really good job of direction by Hal Ashby, whose last film was Coming Home.
He's fine.
He does a real good job of taking this very limited tone, because Sellers can only really act within a very narrow range in this particular role, and making it work for the whole movie. I can see how this could be a satiric review for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. But the fact that it works and it's inventive and challenging and fresh for 2 hours is a real triumph, and I really like this film.
And a tribute, I think, to Sellers, of course. I have been so sick and tired of him replaying Inspector Clouseau from the Pink Panther movies for years now. This is fresh. This brings us back to the Sellers of Dr. Strangelove, a really distinguished performance. And I also think the film has a serious, wistful kind of statement to make. This guy, all he knows is TV in this garden. When he leaves his home, where he's been sheltered for years, he walks out and he carries with him one of those TV remote control clickers, right? He walks out on the streets of Washington. We see these streets as strange places. I mean, it's like visiting this planet for the first time. He has a gang kid come up to him and threaten him. He takes out his TV clicker and snaps it at him. Now, what a strange thing. I mean, you know, this concentration we have on TV.
There's the perfect logic there. That has always worked before for him whenever he saw something he didn't like. You know, incidentally, I like Sellers when he plays Clouseau, but apart from that, we do forget what a good actor he is. And in this film, how well he sells this premise, which is, I think, in a way, it's a kind of a serious message. The higher up you get in American politics, the more the platitude rules, until when you finally get to the top, you're in the land of the platitude, and so the platitudinous man is king. You can almost believe that the president would buy this guy talking to him about plant in the spring, you know, and harvest in the fall.
Anything that makes sense.
Anything like that, right. Good film. One of my favorite movies from last year was a real bone chiller named Halloween, the work of a bright young director named John Carpenter, who's back this year with another thriller called The Fog. And if you watch this scene coming up, I think you'll see the Carpenter is trying to scare us all over again with the same basic story elements that were in Halloween. An isolated small town, a dark and ominous night, and a murderer that springs up out of nowhere like a homicidal jack-in-the-box.
Now, what is the big deal? You've seen fog once, you've seen it for life.
Oh, there's something different about this fog, Dan. It glows. Can't you see anything yet?
Glows? Oh, I get it. You take something to keep you going, right? Does it make you feel a little weird sometimes? Hey.
What?
The lights went out. Everything's going crazy. Barometer's falling, temperature's dropping.
Dan, what is it?
What the hell's that?
Dan, what is it? What's happening? What is it? What's happening?
Someone's shining a light through the window.
Dan, listen to me.
Hold on, sweetheart. I want to check this out.
Dan! Dan, stay on the phone!
This has got to be a joke. Someone's at the front door, sweetheart, playing a stupid joke. And whoever it is, they ain't gonna like finding me home.
Dan, stay away from the door! Dan! Dan!
Hello? Anybody here?
Well, I think once you see that sequence, you've seen the basic scare tactic of The Fog. People open doors, or they turn their backs, or they walk into a dark church, or they go down into the basement, and whammo! The Fog does have a storyline, a very thin storyline. It seems that a ship was wrecked on that coast 100 years ago that very night, and the townspeople at that time murdered the sailors, and the sailors vowed to return as ghosts a century later. Well, you got to admit, as stories go, that will probably do. We don't demand stainless steel plausibility in a thriller, but we do enjoy a colorful and offbeat villain, and that's where The Fog disappointed me, because fog itself just isn't that fascinating as a threat. It rolls in from the sea, it glows in the dark, it contains the ghosts of sailors, and so what? It's just too ungainly as a special effect to allow the kind of sharp-edged, split-second timing that was so frightening in Halloween. So the movie's well made, but it's just not merciless enough.
Exactly right. I mean, the fog, who cares? It's not threatening at all. Also, the repetition of the same pattern of attack is really boring. Knock on the door, guy goes to the door, looks around, then when he least expects it, but we always expect it, he gets it in the neck. It's pretty dull, as a matter of fact. Very disappointing from John Carpenter.
There's another thing here, too. I think Carpenter was depending upon the same kind of craft that he had on Halloween to make the movie work. He doesn't bother to really establish the characters in his town as people. One of the things that was interesting, for example, about Jaws, and to a degree to Halloween, was that we really got to know the people enough to care about them, but we don't care about these people in the fog.
So we get boring characters killed off in boring ways.
Yeah, it's, if you're looking for another movie like Halloween, this is not the movie to go see.
Exactly. Well, here's a film I have mixed feelings about. It's the movie version of Neil Simon's autobiographical play, Chapter 2, which pretty much tells the story of how Neil Simon put his own real life back together again after his first wife died. In real life, Simon ended up marrying again. He married actress Marsha Mason. James Caan in the film plays Simon's character, and Mason, well, I guess she plays herself here. Caan's wife in the picture dies. He's fixed up with Mason, and together they decide to have a trial first date that will last only 5 minutes. Here's part of that first 5 minutes. Two people trading quips in typical Neil Simon fashion. But do people really talk this way?
So, what do you think?
About what?
About me.
God, you really like to come right to the point, don't you?
I'm not always this direct, but we are fighting the clock.
Well, my hunch is you're a very interesting person, George.
My advice to you is to play your hunches.
Can I get you more wine?
No, thanks. I better be going.
Oh, time's up?
Well, I don't need any more. I think I know what my next move is.
Really? What's that?
I'd like to make a regulation date, your basic, normal hours, 7 to 12.
You mean with grown-up clothes and makeup?
Bath, shower, everything.
You think we're ready for the big time?
Yeah, we just spent 4 minutes in the minors. I think we can move up.
Okay, why not? Let's make it.
Terrific. What's today?
Tuesday.
How's Wednesday?
Wednesday works out well.
You could have played hard to get and make it Thursday.
Well, let's stick with Wednesday, and I'll keep you waiting half an hour.
It's fair enough. This was really, very nice. I'm glad we met, Jenny.
So am I, George.
We expect one more gag as he goes out the door. Well, they get married and all looks good, but lurking in the background during and after their honeymoon is Caan's inability to come to grips with the death of his first wife. He still misses her deeply.
Well, as honeymoons go, I don't think he got much of a break.
Really? Sorry you feel that way. I thought it was pretty wonderful.
Well, I don't know what you've experienced in the past, but I found me a little on the moody side.
2 days out of 6 isn't much of a complaint, which I never did, and I think we ought to limit this discussion to present honeymoons.
Can't get to the present without going through the past. Why don't you ever ask me questions? I mean, why do you treat our lives as though there never was a day that happened before we met?
Because I'm not overly curious, that's why. I mean, if there are things that you want to tell me, then tell me. But Christ, does it have to be my first night in this house?
Well, I was wondering when that perfectly calm exterior was going to crack. Thank God for a little antagonism.
Antagonism, hell, this is pure fear. I have terrific animal instincts. I know when my life is about to be threatened.
Aren't you even curious to know who the hell we are? I mean, I think you got some damn romantic image of this man with a tragic past right out of Jane Eyre.
You're the one with the writer's imagination, not me.
It's hard to believe James Caan is a writer in this picture, more the cowboy or the gangster. This is a nice, well-meaning film, but I always felt as though I was watching a phony, concocted play and not a real-life story. Caan and Mason do seem to really care for each other, and it might have been a good film if we simply watched them grow and change together. But no, this story has a gimmick, the death of his first wife. And every few minutes, this gimmick is hammered home as Caan holds his head in pain and makes Mason's life really miserable. It's a one-gimmick movie, not a horrible film so much as it's just one that I really can't recommend.
You know, Gene, I think I like this film even less than you do. And I find it a movie that's really pulling against itself and frustrating the audience at the same time. This is a movie about two people who are preordained and predestined from the first shot to fall in love and to live happily ever after. And because of what you call a gimmick or whatever you want to call it, for an hour and 15 minutes, that happy ending that we want, or the happy life that we want, is postponed by interminable marital squabbles, and we just get tired of them screaming at each other, especially since the plot never really establishes why Caan has such a sudden change of mind about his new bride after he marries her. That's never established.
He has it simply because it's got to be there in the story. The story, just, as we both really are agreeing, I guess, just hangs on this one thing: his wife died. And I think that maybe what Neil Simon, the mistake that he made in writing this movie, is that he thinks that if he has somebody hold their head and scream and complain, that equals good drama. Well, I don't know about his success in plays, but in this film, that doesn't work at all. It's not a particularly good picture.
Okay, we're in agreement. Here's a movie that, a very strong film that I really admire, I like it a lot more than Chapter 2.
Yeah.
Richard Gere plays a male prostitute in American Gigolo. He's a pampered Beverly Hills playboy. His clients include rich middle-aged women who pay $500 and up for his favors. And he can make his clients happy, but he's never happy himself. He suffers from that widespread Hollywood psychological epidemic, the inability to love and to be loved. But then what happens is that the wife of a senator becomes intrigued with Gere. She wants to get personally involved with this guy who keeps everyone at arm's length, and one night she tracks him down to his own apartment.
I thought it would be easier.
What did you say?
I said I thought it would be easier
What would be?
to be with you, procure you.
I told you, you're mistaken.
Why are you doing this to me?
What am I doing?
Embarrassing me.
I'm not embarrassing you.
I can't keep up this front much longer. I came here. I found out who you were, where you lived. I came here in the middle of the night. I wanted to know what it would be like. I brought money. What more can I do? My life.
I don't want to know.
Lauren Hutton looking very, very sincere. At first the attraction is primarily physical, but then the unexpected happens. Hutton and Gere fall in love with one another, and at the same time Gere finds himself framed for a kinky murder out in Palm Springs. He's tracked down by an inquisitive Detective Sunday of the L.A. Vice Squad.
How do you do it, Julian? This afternoon with Mrs. Jarvie, and tonight at the country club. How do you seduce all these women? I don't like you poking around my private life Sunday. Bugging my friends. I'll tell you what. You lay off my clients, I'll give you a few pointers picking up women, okay? How's that?
First, obviously, you dress lousy.
Anybody can fix that, no problem. It's your face. Face, bad face. And your body. What's wrong with your body? You have back problems? You look like a monkey sitting there. Hey, back, shoulders, back. The jaw. Work the jaw. Exercise. You don't want it slack. Up tight. Tight. Yes. Uh-huh. Would you be willing to come in for a lineup? Sure, why not? Doesn't it ever bother you, Julian? What? What you do. Giving pleasure to women. I'm supposed to feel guilty about that. But it's not legal. Legal is not always right. Men make laws. Sometimes they're wrong. Stupid. Or jealous.
Hector Elizondo gives an effective performance there as the surprisingly clever and menacing Detective Sunday. You can almost feel his envy there. Here's this guy who represents everything that he detests, but the guy is handsome, well-dressed, and rich. It's a lovely scene. But it's Richard Gere who makes American Gigolo an interesting movie. It's the portrait of a character who's bizarre, fascinating, offbeat, lonely, maybe just a little dumb.
It's a strong picture, I agree with you. And you know, Roger, you and I are alone, I think, as critics across the country in liking this picture. Everybody else seems to be knocking it. I don't understand why. The film was made by Taxi Driver writer Paul Schrader, and he has this fascination for these low-life, kind of marginal characters who creep along and work during the night, you know, don't have regular jobs, have feelings of self-doubt, and I find those people fascinating, much more interesting than, let's say, the cardboard characters we just saw in Chapter 2. So I can't understand why people are knocking this picture.
I'm in agreement with you here. I like Schrader's other pictures too, Blue Collar and Hardcore. He seems to have two basic subjects, violence and loneliness, especially in an urban setting. But he doesn't simply exploit that sort of thing. It would be so easy to do. There's always an idea in a Schrader film. You always get the sense of the director's intelligence there, commenting on what place. He is almost asking in each movie, what place is there in society for this character? And the character is asking that too. Sometimes there isn't much of an answer. It's very interesting.
I think it's a very interesting movie. It's R-rated. It's a little raunchy, but I think because, as you point out, there's an idea there, it makes the film worthwhile. Our next film, though, is really screwed up. It's called Fatso, and it's half a comedy, half a drama about a fat person trying to lose weight. The man with the weight problem, Dom DeLuise, who early in the picture sees his cousin die at age 39 from obesity, so DeLuise is finally persuaded to join a Weight Watchers type program. But a fattening problem occurs when he gets together with two other fatties and all they can talk about is food. And when they want to eat, not even the padlocks on their kitchen cabinets can stop them.
Get the honey, Junior.
Give him the honey, Junior.
It's in the cupboard, Dom. Well, get it. What else do they cover with that chocolate? I mean, besides the orange wedges? Grapes? Peaches? Strawberries. Junior, the honey. Those big, juicy stem strawberries are dipped into that dark, dark chocolate.
Get the honey! Get the honey!
Let Tommy know.
Well, from that, you might think that Fatso is a sweet, pleasant comedy about compulsive eating, but writer-director Anne Bancroft, writing and directing here for the first time, wants to make a serious statement, too, and so the comedy is regularly interrupted with long, agonizing scenes of screaming, crying, suffering. This mix of comedy and tragedy never works. Fatso is just a screwed-up film that I don't think really knows what it wants to be.
I'm in agreement here, Gene. I think this is really a bad film. It seems to me, as you pointed out, there are basically two approaches to this subject of overweight, and that is a comic approach and a tragic approach. And Anne Bancroft unerringly succeeds in missing both approaches. Her movie just wanders around in the middle totally aimlessly. It takes really cheap shots at programs like Weight Watchers. To what purpose, we don't know. That's unworthy of her. And at the same time, it establishes this character of Dom DeLuise with his banging his head against the wall and all the weeping and so forth so that we understand his grief. And then it makes fun of it. I mean, this movie is just totally at sea.
Well, now, continuing on the subject of bad movies, here's Spot the Wonder Dog, the cinematic canine who can spot a bad flick easier than he can find a fire hydrant. Yeah, it's time for Dog of the Week, where Roger and I each pick the week's worst movies.
Okay, Gene, my dog this week is a reprehensible attempt at quickie exploitation called Guyana, Cult of the Damned. It's advertised as the true story of the mass suicide of the Reverend Jim Jones cult followers at Jonestown, Guyana last year. And if there's any reason at all to see a movie about such a sad and tragic event, it might be to try to understand why it could happen. But this movie doesn't contain a clue as to why all those people took poison and died. And Reverend Jim Jones is portrayed merely as a crazy preacher who wears sunglasses all the time.
This hand, God's hand, is my hand. And it will guide you. And you will be freed. And shall be delivered into paradise.
Some paradise. We get no sense of the charisma that the real Jim Jones must have had. The movie lingers in gruesome detail on scenes of torture, perversion, cruelty, and finally the mass suicide. This is a despicable movie.
And when they took out the electrodes to put them on the little boy, that's about when I walked out of the theater. My Dog is yet another film from our old buddies out in Salt Lake City, Sun Classic Pictures. This time it's the Bermuda Triangle from the same fast buck operators who brought us In Search of Noah's Ark and The Lincoln Conspiracy. These films never prove a thing, and the Bermuda Triangle is no exception. Exactly what is snaring all those ships and airplanes in the Atlantic Ocean that has a variety of sailors looking skyward with amazement in their eyes? This film never says what exactly. It could be magnetic waves, a sea monster, an undertow, a laser beam from the lost city of Atlantis. Heck, I suppose it could be somebody on Noah's Ark. These Sun Classic Pictures are just junk sold with high-pressure TV ads. You know, we all ought to be wise to Sun Classic's game by now.
And speaking for both Gene and myself, we'd like to thank Sun Classic for providing about half of the dogs of the week on this program. But so much for the dogs. Now let's take another look at the main movies on this program. And Gene, for a change, we agreed on all 5 movies this week.
We're both smart.
Okay. We were most enthusiastic about Being There with Peter Sellers playing a simple-minded gardener who smiles his way into the White House inner circle. We both admire this movie very much and give it 2 yes votes. We strongly recommend that you see Being There. But Gene and I both voted no for The Fog. It just wasn't scary enough. 2 more no votes for Chapter 2, Neil Simon's autobiographical story of his second marriage. It's a psychological case study rather than an entertainment. 2 big yes votes for Paul Schrader's American Gigolo, starring Richard Gere in a compelling performance as a male prostitute who's framed for murder. And finally, 2 big no votes for Fatso, one of the most lightweight comedies of the year.
That's it for this show. Next time on Sneak Previews, we'll review 5 more movies, including Cruising, the controversial new Al Pacino thriller set in the homosexual world, The Last Married Couple in America, a domestic comedy with George Siskel and Natalie Wood, and Saturn III, the science fiction adventure starring Kirk Douglas and Farrah Fawcett. Until then, see you at the movies.
Funding for Sneak Previews was provided by this station and by other public television stations.